Hi, everybody. It is Stacey Ray, and I am here to welcome you to Life Reimagined. And we are going to talk about all things that have to do with turning life's detours into new destinations.
Life Reimagined with Stacey Ray.
I am beyond excited and honored to have one of my besties, Stephanie Kurtzuba, who is an actor, writer, producer. And trust me, you've seen her. She's been in everything from The Irishman with Robert De Niro to Wolf of Wall Street, Blue Bloods, Tulsa King. We're going to talk about her esteemed career throughout the show. Stephanie, I am thrilled to have you here to help us kick off our podcast.
I could not be happier.
Well, I can't think of anyone I'd rather have on here to do this
Oh.
today. So, yay, us.
Yay, us.
Yes. I think we should tell everybody how we even met because I think it's such a fun story and unexpected, really. We actually met how many years ago?
Don't even say it.
Okay, okay. But Steph was on her honeymoon with her husband, Josh, and we were doing a transatlantic cruise, my husband and I, and we were headed to Italy, the Mediterranean.
Yeah, we did the whole Mediterranean coast. It was the
Yes.
biggest vacation I had ever been on at that point in my life. I was so excited.
Yes, and I think we just kind of ran into you, like, on the deck, if I remember correctly, and we just started chit-chatting.
We sailed out of New York and we sailed to Lisbon. So we had like 5 days at sea with, just the other people on the boat and nowhere to go and be. And we kept sort of running into each other and saying hi. And then we finally struck up a conversation. And immediately I was like, oh, these are our people.
And that's what we said. Oh god, we love them. Do you remember the one night where we actually brought, I think it was yours and Josh's little boombox kind of thing,
Oh, yeah.
and we were out on the deck, like, late at night
Uh
just
huh.
playing music, and we're like,
That
"Oh,
was
I
the
love that song. I love that song."
We had this, Josh and I, because, this was the beginning of our marriage and we didn't have a whole lot of money. So we we found this workaround in the in all of the like rules on the ship. You could actually bring your own wine that they assumed then that you would take to dinner with you and uncork for you. But what we would do is we would just drink it at night out on the deck by the whirlpools.
Right.
So we used to have wine evenings and Josh would play music and you guys came over that one time and we just had like a little party.
Yeah, we had so much fun, and I remember Princess Cruises karaoke, the
Oh my
concert,
God.
but it was like
It was like American Idol type, like, yeah, because we're old now, girl. So yes, it was back in those days.
that's true, we are old now.
Older. We're not old, we're just older and wiser.
Yeah, and, you were amazing, and I think you blew people away. They had no I first of all, we didn't know that you were amazing, and we kept telling everybody, "You've gotta come hear her. She's gonna be in the semifinals. You've gotta come hear her. She's gonna be in the finals." Like,
I have to tell you, I used to love to do that, and it was such an unfair advantage. Like, at that point in my career, I was making my living on Broadway. It was so unfair. I was like,
yeah,
"But I like to sing in public, and this gives me a chance to do it."
and this was actually before we all had smartphones and, uh, I don't even remember, did we have email or did we just
The good old days. I feel like I wish we could go back to that where you just had no distractions, and it wasn't like you had to constantly check who needed you. You could just be with the people you were with.
exactly, exactly, and what was so funny is, like, when we were talking and you were like and I said, like, "What do you do?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'm an actress." And I was like, "Oh, that's nice." And, Josh does set design. I was like, "Oh, that's nice." And you and I were talking, like, recently about how Jersey people are so unfazed by things like that. Like, we're
It's
not
so true.
starstruck people, but
Yeah.
your talent blew me away. We just kept building our friendship, and I remember you and Josh coming down and doing, like, a fundraiser,
Yeah.
and you were the entertainer.
Well, you've always been so great about committing your time and energy to causes that you really believe in. So you had something, and I came down, and it was just a great, it was a great evening. I was very pregnant. Finding a dress was the hardest part about that whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. If I remember correctly, there's, like, 4 or 500 people there at that fundraiser, and you did amazing, and, we've just been friends ever since, and we have such kismet, we're always seem to be on the, like, same wavelength, but, you know, as with all friendships, life does get in the way, so you have these
Yep,
periods of absence, but I've always decided that the way I know that someone's, like, truly my friend is that I don't have to explain myself. If I don't talk to you for the next year, tomorrow I call you and we pick up like
I
nothing
love that.
happened. And that's always been like our relationship, I think.
Agreed. And,
Yeah.
my mother always said water seeks its own level. And I just feel like when you find people who are, vibrating at the same frequency, it's easy. It's easy to do that. Life happens, you drop away, you come back, and yeah, and you never have to explain yourself to me. I get it.
Same.
I'd post bail, girl. I'd post your bail.
And likewise, for sure. So you're actually from Nebraska.
My dirty Midwestern secret. Yeah.
Yes. And how did a Nebraska girl end up in New York in the entertainment industry?
It's such a good question. I ask myself that regularly. I grew up dancing, like a lot of little girls, ballet class and stuff. My mother in particular, but my parents, she loved the art. She loved going to plays, and she exposed me to things early on, dance and theater, which was, I mean, I think it's unusual at any time in history, but also geographically to be in the middle of, Omaha had things going on, but it's certainly not like a large market like Chicago or a big city. So, you had to seek out opportunities to see cultural and artistic stuff. So she did that, and I just loved dancing, so it was a natural extension of performing to start getting into theater and stuff. I did local community theater and stuff. And then by the time it was time to decide where to go to college or if I wanted to go to college and all of that, it seemed like a really irresponsible choice to study theater. So I wasn't going to, I was going to study journalism. And then my mom got sick when I was in my late teens, like 16. And I just had this realization that, like, nothing is promised. Like, life can be over quickly and that you get one time around. And I think that just sort of like having that realization at 16 was super formative for me. And I was like, well, I got to get out of here and figure out if I can do this professionally. And so I ended up at NYU, and that's sort of where it all began.
I don't know many 16-year-olds that would, when I was 16, I was interested in which boy was I going to see tonight,
I mean,
like I
I
was
was
not,
interested in that too, but yeah.
but sadly, losing your mom.
Yeah, and when it's thrust upon you and you don't have a choice in it, it's like, your options are you can try and wrap your head around it and try and understand it and try and learn from it and work through the lens of your life, or you sort of curl up into a ball, which I definitely, there were lots of moments of that as well. But it's interesting to my kids are now like around the age I was when I lost my mom, and to watch them and go, "Oh, this is what 16 is." You know what I mean? Or this is what 15 is when you're not dealing with something super traumatic like that is it's interesting. 'Cause I didn't, it was only my experience. I only knew what I knew from my own, life. Now I'm watching, "Oh, this is what it's like to be like a quote unquote normal
Yeah, go through the
16-year-old." Yes,
normal
it's very
teenage
different.
drama and
Yeah, and,
choices and
but we all have our shit that we live through.
absolutely. I mean,
It's
all of
formative.
us. So you went to NYU, and where did that lead you on your trajectory into actually getting jobs and deciding that you actually really did want to do this professionally?
Well, I think that I often say that NYU was an amazing school. It taught me to be an artist, but it didn't necessarily teach me how to get a job. I went there a long time ago. I'm sure the program is a little more adjusted for modern day employment, but uh, I sort of stumbled around and did it the old fashioned way. Like I feel like I was kind of the last vestiges of the kids who come out of art school or come out of acting school and just sort of pound the pavement, which is quite literally what I did, with my little audition book with my music in it and my tap shoes and like waiting in line on West 44th Street. Yeah, I know,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I'm sure there's a song somewhere that
yeah.
expresses it perfectly. Um but yeah, that's kinda honestly, I did it the really, really old-fashioned way. Like, we didn't have TikTok. We didn't have, social media platforms to, like, build an audience or whatever, which I think is awesome.
I think it's awesome, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't understand it. I don't understand
Yeah,
how it happens. I hear that term viral. I don't really know what that means or how one
right.
becomes viral. And then you see all these stars who now you hear their bio, it's like, oh, they started on TikTok.
I was just watching an SNL skit that was like, old school rappers talking about, "Oh, I sold 1,000,000 albums," and then this influencer is like, "Oh, I sold 1,000,000,000."
My last song got 3 billion streams, bro.
So as you started beating, the streets
Right.
and, going from door to door and doing it, as you say, the old fashioned way, what do you think was your biggest challenge?
There were many. I think honestly, the biggest challenge in my career, even to date, is just sticking with it, persistence. I mean, it's such a privilege to do what I do. I love what I do. I love getting to be an actor. But all artists, I think, are always looking to do more, to be able to do their art more often. And so much of what my career is about trying to get jobs, not necessarily always doing jobs. Sort of the job of my job is auditioning. Yeah, and getting the job. And then once you get the job and you're on set and you're doing what you do, that's the cake part. That's the great part. So to me, the hardest part of the early years and even now being more established is still just trying to maximize opportunities to get to do what I do.
And how has then and now changed in how you get opportunities?
Well, my career has changed and I've moved more from like being on stage to being on screen, there's just some obvious changes in the way that, I am presenting myself and auditioning, from the material itself to the circumstances around it, like not necessarily going into a room in front of a table of people like I used to do for theater auditions. For film and TV, it's, before the pandemic, it was you would go into a room with maybe one or two other people and a camera. Now, since the pandemic, it's changed even since then. Everything is I tape it. I have a studio here in my home. I It's just me. Half the time I'm reading with if I can't find an actor friend of mine to come and help me out, I'm reading with like my husband, who's not an actor. So he's actually pretty good. Or who's actually very good is my oldest son now because his voice is really low, so he sounds like an adult.
Oh, so that's a very funny story about Calvin and his entree into
Oh.
entertainment. Tell our listeners about that because I just still like
Isn't it funny?
it is funny.
And it's such a fluke. It was just such the way that it happened. So, I had been cast in a film called Bad Education with Hugh Jackman. And I had this great couple of, few scenes that I was really excited about. And my character has like a 10-year-old child in the scene. And we were about, I don't know, a few weeks from filming. And I got a phone call from the casting director who said, "We're having a difficult time finding the kid to play your kid. But I know you have two sons that are about the right age. Are either of them actors? And would they be interested in auditioning?" I was like, "No, my kids are not professional children. They have sort of, they know what mom and dad do, and they have chosen to go the other direction." I was super fine with. Um, anyway, long story short, my oldest was like, "Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I'll try it." And the minute I like did the scene with him, I was like, "Oh no, he's really good."
She wouldn't even let him take a bathroom break during the test, and he has a hyperactive bladder. Chad, honey, tell him how I have a note here from his doctor, okay?
Schweitzer, just calm down.
Chad, he is just as gifted as everyone else in his year.
Hugh Jackman was so kind to him and was so interested in him. But what was really funny was my son not being into like the Wolverine thing or anything like that at that point in his life. He asked Hugh Jackman for his autograph. And he was like, "Oh, sure, I'll give it to you." And my son goes, "Oh, good, because my friend James really likes you, and I'm going to give this to him."
Oh my God. That is hilarious.
And I was like, "Oh, God."
Yeah. I'm not crazy about you, but my friend
Yeah, he was like, "Yeah,
know.
you're a Wolverine something."
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, will you sign this for my friend
Yeah,
James?
do me a
This will make me
solid
look
so I
really
look
good in
cool to
front of
my
him.
friends. And then when you asked him, did he want to keep doing it? What did he say?
Oh, that was the best part of all. That was my finest parenting moment, I think, in my life. He said, "No offense, Mom. Acting's just not my thing." It was he literally said, "Well, that was kind of cool. I mean, it was on my bucket list."
Right.
He's 10, by the way. He says this at 10.
Yeah.
It was on my bucket list, but no offense. It's just kind of
Yeah.
blah. It's not
Yeah.
really my thing.
You and I have talked about this before because you actually have an interesting trajectory from an ageism, what I call ageism, of your transition from stage to screen. Do you want to talk about that?
I feel like I'm this strange outlier because it is the norm. And I think anybody who watches film or television or anything knows this. Usually for women in particular, once you've reached 40, that's it. If you're young and beautiful and you're kind of playing all the roles, the older you get, the fewer roles there are, the less interested people are in writing those stories and telling those stories of women over 40. You get sort of relegated. What do they say, from the lead and the ingenue to like the prosecutor to like the lead counsel to grandma. Like it just goes like that. It's like young woman, mother, lead prosecutor, out to pasture. And I have been extraordinarily lucky that mine has been the inverse. My trajectory once I hit 40 is when I transitioned to film and television. It's when I first filmed The Wolf of Wall Street, and it was insane.
In the infamous Kimmy Belzer role.
All of you know Kimmy Belzer, right?
Yes, we do. Fuck you. I had done a few films before that, but that came out when I was like 40, and it was like all of a sudden a new avenue of opportunities opened to me in film and television, which was just really wild.
You have worked with some of the, leading men of the century. You've certainly done films with Scorsese and things like that. What is that like as a woman in those environments with such strong, what we see as masculine men? Is there a different dynamic when you're on set or the expectations of you as an actress and possibly even as a contributor to the script or
Oh,
any of
that's
that?
such a good question. I have to say that my experiences with working, let's say on The Irishman, working with Martin Scorsese for the second time, and I was playing opposite Robert De Niro.
Hi, Frank.
Hey,
What can I get for you?
I'm just gonna get the wine now.
You just call me if you need anything.
I also spent a lot of time with Joe Pesci, who was in the film. Joe and Bob and Marty have been friends for the better part of 40 years. I mean, they all came up in New York City together. They've been collaborating most of their lives. And they're friends, they have this friendship. So that experience was unique insofar as the collaboration. Of course, I was very welcome into it, as particularly with Marty. He is brilliantly open to conversations and thoughts and ideas. Frankly, he doesn't have to be. He's Martin Scorsese. But that's one of the things that makes him great, is that he creates an environment where people really want to put their best foot forward and enrich the tapestry of the film. So he's always open to it. But because Marty and Bob were working so closely and, they all had this connection, I found that my inclination, if I had something I wanted to talk about, I would, but I really took the opportunity to just shut the fuck up and listen.
Got it. I got
Only not because they never made me feel that way. I just recognized, I was like, I am amongst the best of the best right now. It is a really good time to just learn.
So I have to tell you, I find that fascinating because to me, recognizing that, how much you could learn from that situation, being with the best of the best, to me, that is actually an act of strength.
Oh, thank you.
Because I think sometimes as women, we get, I don't want to use the term like caught up, but, we have to work so hard, much harder than men, in being heard and having a voice.
Yes. To be seen, to be heard, especially as a woman of a certain age.
But sometimes your voice is heard through listening.
Wow, that's a really cool way to think about it. I wish that I had had that sort of framing around it. Mine was born more of a selfishness of when will I ever be in this situation again? I just want to absorb as much as possible because the amount of expertise available to me in this moment, I want to take advantage of all of it. And if I keep my mouth shut and just listen, chances are I'll absorb even more. So I refer to The Irishman as it was my version of grad school, of filmmaking grad school.
Great observation. As familiar as I am with your work, my executive producer pointed out to me this morning, actually, that he noticed that all of your roles have been strong women.
Fuck off, fuck you, fuck off.
Well, I didn't say like fuck off. I said fuck off.
You do not tell me fuck off.
Will you please tell them thank you very much for noticing?
I will. And while I think like somewhere in there I knew that, I didn't, necessarily place so much emphasis on it, but has that when you're looking at roles or you're offered roles, and I know part of it is, as you said, we all have to eat and things like that, but are you particular about the roles that you accept because you want to be seen and portray to other women what it means to be strong and courageous and brave?
First of all, thank you. This is lovely of you to say any of these things. I very much appreciate it. Yes, I will tell you this. I made a very, very conscious decision several years ago after I had sort of built my resume to the point where I felt like I was in a position to be able to be pickier. But I said to my representatives, I was like, I'm really done being a victimized person. Don't send me any scenes where I'm just the crying wife. Don't send me any roles where I am like, somebody that if it's a role that something significant has happened to them and they're processing it and we get to watch them process it and come through to the other side, I will give it a read. But if the character just exists in the story to be a victim in some way, I'm just not interested. I just feel like I don't need to contribute that to the world. Women and human beings, not even just women, are victimized enough on
Right.
the daily. I don't think of
Right.
that as useful entertainment unless it is within the confines of a larger truth being revealed and a discovery about our humanity. I just find it manipulative and I just think there's more interesting stories to tell.
I have another question for you. So we were talking about, all these strong women that you deliberately choose to play, which I love. How have any of them, if any, really impacted your life, and how, like, have you learned things from them that you can use as life lessons, or,
Oh.
mantras or anything like that?
I've learned a lot from a lot of the characters that I've played. The way that I always approach every character at the onset, trying to find the connections between my experience and their experience, so that I can at least feel, a truth. Like we understand this to be like a base level of truth, and then I extrapolate from and build things beyond that. So I feel like every single character I have played, I share something in common with. But it's interesting because then, as you transform into the character's journey, the lessons that the actor learns. My character in Blue Bloods, Captain Paula McNichols, her dynamic was always one of sort of tough love with Eddie Janko, played by Vanessa Ray.
You've been captain, what, like 5, 6 days?
2 weeks.
And separating us is your top priority.
Careful, Officer Django.
And we would laugh because we would have the same dynamic every time, which would be like, Janko, you messed up. You got to do it by the rules. And then halfway through, she'd be like, but boss, this is the right way to do it. And I'd be like, well, don't tell anybody, but I helped you. That was kind of the same. But what I really loved about playing that role over and over again was she had a real tough exterior, but her heart was always in the right place. I learned a lot about just letting go of worrying about how people feel about you. If your heart's in the right place, it's in the right damn place.
So, how does being a creator and a producer differ from everything else you've done in your career, and what satisfaction do you get from that?
It's you know what? It's adjacent, but it does feel very different. It feels much more powerful because sort of the plight of the actor is waiting to be chosen. Even at the highest, most successful levels, there is an element of being chosen, by whoever it is that's telling the story or has directed it or is writing it or is producing it. Being on the other side of that, being the person who generates the idea or puts the project together feels just much more um, satisfying in terms of feeling like there's a little more control, which I think control is probably just a big, huge illusion anyway, but it helps with the illusion
Yeah.
of control. And I have to say, it has deeply impacted my appreciation for the entire creative process. As an actor, you don't even realize it because you're so often the one that gets all the attention, right? But you don't even realize how much time, energy, development go into developing an idea before an actor is even invited into the process. Like the actor comes like almost towards the very end. And to see how much creative energy and time and collaboration it takes to take something from its genesis to the page to a producing partner to financing to, it's there's a whole world before the world in which the actor steps on set.
Well, now that's a great segue because I want to ask you about something, and we can or cannot talk about it, but you have a fascinating story in your family that I know you've been working on forever. And hopefully you can tell us all about it if you'd like. Talk to us about your Aunt Louise.
God, what a cool story. It's funny because I hesitate to reference her as cool or interesting, even though she is all of those things to me, because in truth, she was an absolute criminal.
Yeah.
But I will say this, she was a human being who absolutely refused to play by the rules, which I'm not advocating crime. However, I am a huge fan of hers because I feel like she just sort of refused to be confined by things that people told her she had to be or do. And I just, man, as the older I get, the more I want to just break out of these confines of what I'm supposed to be and who I'm told I should be. And that's why I very much appreciate the comment about playing strong women, because that was a conscious decision on my part at one point in my career to say, I kind of only want to be these people now.
I think it is so easy for us to get boxed into societal expectations. What I find fascinating is how many women want to box other women in to those boxes.
That's so true. And I find myself doing it too.
I do too.
I have to check my own.
Even in my industry, I find that it's very challenging sometimes to find that line of, wait a minute, no. And so, I've built my company on empowering women, but there are so many ways in which women can empower themselves, right?
Yes.
And I think I'm shocked every day how many women don't know that, right?
Yes, I was just having this conversation with my teenage son, and I was talking about the power of narrative. And
Yes.
I don't mean storytelling in the world, I mean the stories we tell ourselves.
It's funny, I think I was like this old before I kept reminding myself with these personal narratives, would I talk to my best friends the way that I'm talking to myself right now? What an epiphany that was for me. And it was the start of my journey to start being nicer to me.
Oh, I love that.
Because I would never call you the names or anyone the names that I would say to myself or blame you or blame someone else for the things I was blaming myself for. And I realized, wait a minute. This is the this is how you start to actually care about yourself and learn to, if you can't love yourself, at least start to try and like yourself. And that's, I think, at the core of where empowerment comes from. Mike used to say something to me all the time.
Hmm.
And sometimes it made me mad, especially because I was pissed off about a situation. And he'd go, listen, you are exactly where you are supposed to be in this very moment. Whether you understand why or not, you are exactly where you are meant to be. And it took me a long time to start accepting that as loving advice instead of just trying to calm me down because, like, wow, I don't want to deal with that.
I can see how that would be infuriatingly zen when you're trying to, like, be pissed off about something.
And as you know, I'm not the most zen person in the world, but I've been trying
I
to.
don't know, I think you're pretty damn evolved, mama.
Well, that comes with age. I'm 65 now, and a lot really has changed for me. I'm going to switch gears a minute because this is something that I talk to a lot of women about, and I'll bring up the term invisible, you know, being invisible. And I think for some women, they don't really understand what I mean by that. And a lot of times they'll say, oh, well, I actually like being invisible. I can do whatever I want or whatever. But I think they're misunderstanding my meaning of invisible for anonymous or, you know, I'm on the beach in a
Right,
bathing suit and nobody's looking at me.
right.
That's really not what I mean. And so if I were to use that term with you, that at a certain age we become invisible to the world, what is your perception of that?
I think it's also, feeling like my experiences, my stories, the things I've learned and wanna talk about don't seem to be interesting to they're interesting to my friends, but they don't seem to be interesting to the world writ large, which is a shame because I have more shit to say now
Yeah, than I ever did.
than I ever did and more interesting perspectives than I ever did at
Well,
30.
how can you not be more interesting when you've had the life experiences that you've had, right?
Bingo.
And it never ceases to amaze me. One of my biggest pet peeves is when, and I don't want to pick on women or generational things, but I will say when younger women will try to what I call mansplain to me what feminism is.
Oh,
Or
really?
yeah. Um okay, first of all, it is because of my generation and the generation before me, that we're
Yeah.
even having this conversation. Let's not forget that 50 years
Progress is
ago,
cumulative.
yeah, 50 years ago was the anniversary of me even be able to get my own credit card without my husband's signature,
So
right?
nuts. That's nuts.
Yeah. So I don't need someone to tell me what appropriate feminism looks like or, the proper way to say something to someone or I should or should not accept things because my life's experiences, you don't have a clue. You just really don't. And I am so proud of women like you who keep carving paths for other women. We hear all the time about shattering that ceiling. I think it's really easy to forget that every day there are women shattering little ceilings,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
when you take on these roles of strong women and you're making a conscious decision to say, I'm not going to be a victim, even in the example that I portray for other women, that's a ceiling. If I just think there's so many things about empowerment that we want to make sometimes into like big deals, but they're the little things, right?
Yeah, there is it's a the day-to-day, sort of bumping up against all of those things. It happens in the quiet moments, right? It's the quiet things. It's the quiet decisions we make. It's the quiet things that we do. I have often said that radical the most radical feminist thing I've ever done is raise 2 little boys and raise them in a specific way to sort of be aware.
I think the word empowerment is used interchangeably to mean a lot of things, but to me, it's about reclaiming your life, reimagining your life, using your voice, even if it's quiet.
Mhm.
But are there things in your career that you see like a life reimagined? Like, are you now like looking at your career a little differently than you were 10 years ago or 5 years ago?
Yes, no question. And it's funny that you use the word reimagine because I think it was the better part of 10 years ago. I've had multiple sort of like epiphany moments in my life. I can think of like 3 or 4, but I did have one. It was, I was up for a very big job. The process of getting like a lead on a television show is there's multiple sort of hoops that you have to sort of pass through till you get up to the network level and all of that. And I was at the very sort of last hoop. And the pressure I was putting on myself was tremendous, just tremendous. And I remember having a moment in a hotel room where I was just heart was beating and I was just trying to get my nerves under control. And I thought to myself in my head, well, what's the worst that could happen?
Right.
And I answered my own thought out loud. Like I didn't do it consciously. It just came out of my
Yeah.
mouth. And I said, oh, I could get this job. And I burst into tears. And I literally fell to my knees because this truth happened in this moment of I have been striving my whole life for this one thing. I'm on the verge of, sort of putting that final piece in place. And in that moment, I went, but I don't know that I want this. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for a
Wow.
myriad of reasons, the biggest part of which was it would have taken me away from my family. And I just in that moment, the clarity that I had of like, oh, my priorities have shifted and I didn't even realize it. Like I was still just doing what I was supposed to be doing because that's what I had done.
Yeah.
And after that epiphany, I started reimagining a career for myself that was not just the hired gun who was brought in to speak somebody else's words and fulfill somebody else's vision. I realized I was like, well, I have stories to tell. I have things I want to say. I have other aspects of my creative self beyond just the work that I do as an actor. It's time to embrace those and reimagine my trajectory.
So tell us about that. How have you done that? Like, how are you?
It's been, you know what? By my fingernails. I mean, I just, I come from a generation, I think you'll probably relate to this, where I had to break through a lot of my subconscious beliefs
Yeah.
about, well, I can't be a writer because I didn't go to school for that. Well, I can't make films because I didn't go to school for that. Or I'm not an expert. I don't have any legitimacy in that arena.
Imposter syndrome.
Oh, girl, big time. And I really had to break down. It took me the better part of 5 years to shut up those voices. I mean, and listen, they still nip at me here and there. But I finally was just like, if not now, when? And if not me, who? I am of the belief that you get one time around,
Right.
and time to explore. Time to try because I don't know. I think the fear is a really powerful tool. And when we carry it inside ourselves, when it's internalized with all of those, well, you can't do that. Who told you you could do that? what makes you an expert? All of these things that were like, I was like self-containing.
I have suffered from it my entire career, or careers plural, always feeling like one day I'm going to wake up and people are going to think she doesn't know what she's doing. She's just saying that. It's always been my fear. And so I get it so completely. And but you've started having your successes when you decided to challenge your fears and get out there and do that. And you are a writer, you are a producer with some amazing projects.
And it's kind of crazy because I w- I had to just say I'm willing to fail. And listen, and I fail all the time. I fail daily. And I actually think that if I hadn't been so scared of failure, I would be further along at this point in my life. Not just in my career, but just in general. I think it's so funny the things that we fear because they aren't real. People fail all day, every day, and that's fine. As long as you are willing to get up and dust off and go, "Whew, that was rough," and keep going, you know?
Definitely that personal narrative, the stories we tell each ourselves, you know.
This that personal yeah, absolutely. And why do we steal our own power by telling ourselves things that aren't true? Why?
It's very funny in my industry with trying to empower women through travel. One of the things that we get is, we have a lot of women that travel with us who are first time travelers. They've never traveled before, or they've never traveled alone, or they're petrified of traveling by themselves, even in a group, because, we do all the group travel. And resoundingly, you know what we hear after they find that whatever it is inside of them that allows them to take that leap and just do it, they always come back and say the same thing. I wish I hadn't waited so long.
I find what you've created so meaningful and so moving. Not just because I love you and you're my friend, but because I think you're doing good in the world, you know? It's like that the quiet glass ceilings that are being shattered, but you're not just doing it for you, you're doing it for all these women by your very mission of what the company was came to exist out of.
And it's magic, Steph. It is magic because every time I see a woman, she gets a different look on her face. Her whole demeanor changes, her body language changes. And said, yeah, man, I did just walk through the fucking Denver airport all by myself.
Yeah.
And I found my gate.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they were petrified to even book the flight. So to me, it's like, yeah, girl, you just look at that power you have. You can do anything. Quite frankly,
Yeah.
you and I both know if you can navigate an airport, you can do anything. But,
Ain't
it's
that the
just,
truth?
right? So, what's in store for you now? Like with all these amazing ways of reimagining your life, which I love.
I feel like I'm on the precipice of another I don't know, another layer being shed. I don't know. I'm facing in the next like 3 years, I'm facing having, kids out of the house. And while I have traditionally been very scared about that day, I'm starting to feel a little more excitement about it. Not that they're going to be gone. I'm always going to wish they lived in my house forever and ever and ever. But excited about the possibility of what that time and energy can be spent on. that is currently, that is currently going to their sort of everyday, which is my joy and my privilege. Honestly, it's my favorite thing I've ever done in my life is to be a mom.
But life does change so drastically when the kids are gone.
Life changes, and
Yeah,
it's supposed to by design. Like my job was
absolutely.
never to like stay in this moment forever. My job was to raise them so that they can go off. Um, but I feel like I'm facing whatever the next uh, step is outside of the life I know right now, and I'm starting to play with ideas for businesses of my own. And again, do I have any legitimacy at a I mean, I don't have an MBA, but guess what? I do have ideas and I have a lot of chutzpah.
So, what would your advice be? Because listen, you've got a lot of women that you run into. I certainly have a lot of women that I speak to. What's your best tip for women who want to reimagine their life and how they can really do that and see that you can go left, you can go right, you can go straight. There's no wrong answer.
My best piece of advice is don't let fear stop you. Fear is, like I said, is a great motivator, but it can really shrink your life. And I think it's really easy as we get older to start to shrink. We don't go out into the world as much because it gets harder. We don't like to drive. We don't like to be cold. We don't, all these tiny little things that can add up. And before you know it, 10 years later, you're like, I don't really have a lot of friends. I don't go out very often. I don't, and I think those are all tiny little fear-based decisions that we make on the daily. And I think if you're just aware of, am I making this choice out of fear? And if the answer is yes, then make sure you push against that at least a few times a day.
I think that's critical. I have a rule as much as I travel, and I've always had this rule for myself that every trip I take, I have to do one thing that I've never done before, and I really hope that it's something that normally would scare me. So that I try to like overcome these sometimes really silly fears. Other times they've been bigger, and then I'm like, holy crap, I loved that. When can we do it again?
And that feeling that you just described of feeling successful is also what you were describing with like your client who walked through the airport for the first time. And it's the same thing that I have been raising my children to do because like my instinct is to protect and keep them safe, but I realize they don't gain any confidence in themselves if I'm constantly rescuing them. I have to let my son take the car and
Right,
go.
right.
It's good for him and it's good for me.
I think I'm in that generation of where we were taught as women, oh, you don't need to worry about that. Your husband will do it. Your father
Yeah.
will do it. Your so and so. Always a man will do that for you. And, but then in the same thing, like on the same plane, oh, well, you've got to learn to do that. But it was such mixed messaging, you know?
So mixed. Yeah,
So
that's
all the things that my daughter takes for granted, like, what do you mean you don't know how to do that? Well, most women in my generation don't know how to do those things, you know? And that's because those were the messages we always got. So I always love when I think about each little tiny step is huge. And even for me, there are still so many things that I maybe have not done for myself or, that I'm still a little afraid I can't do.
I feel that every year at tax time, I feel like I'm a 5-year-old. I feel like I've been reduced to being a child again because I get so overwhelmed and so scared, and then I get through it every day I'm here,
Yeah.
and I go, "I can do this.
Yeah.
I can do this." There are
Yeah.
these like, adulting kinds of things
I
that,
know. That's what they call it now, right?
that are
Adult.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
hard to remember. Yeah, you're capable. You're capable.
Is there anything that you do to right now engage in actual self-love and self-care for Stephanie?
I have been allowing myself every single morning to just have my coffee and not read emails, not do any work, not let anyone bother me till I finish my coffee.
I love that. The purpose of this podcast is to hopefully present topics and guests for women to see that no matter what age you are and no matter what your circumstances are, you do have choices. And there are no wrong choices if it feels right for you. And I can't tell you what your life reimagined should be, but I do want you to know it's possible. And it's up to you. And hopefully, we'll be giving women the tools and, real life stories of women who have had to make some difficult or challenging or impossible choices. And I'm excited to say we're going to have great episodes. Our next episode, we're bringing on uh, one of my friends, Lori Helke, who started a travel blog called Lori Loves Adventure after it took her 7 years to get up the courage and the money to take her own personal solo trip to Paris.
Oh my
So
God, I love
it's
that.
a great journey and a great story.
I
But
can't wait to hear that story.
yeah, it's going to be great. So, anyway, Steph, thank you so much. I'm going to let you say any final thing that you want to say.
Oh no, do I have to say something wise? No, I would thank you for having me, and always I love this is like a conversation you and I would have on any given day, and I just love our connection.
Me too.
I love that you're putting this out into the world. I think it's I know I could use it. And I hope that other people listen and benefit from it as well. Or if at the very least, even if it's just for entertainment, I hope something gets in there and makes them go, hey, you know what? Maybe I am going to make a choice today that's not based in fear. Or maybe there is another chapter for me.
I think we all have a new chapter. I hear a lot of women, and I've said it myself, like, I'm in my third act. Fuck that. I'm not in my third act. I'm just getting started. Watch out, world. Stacey's coming for you.
No, no,
I
no, no,
know.
no, 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 no.
I'm ready.